Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here.
Trachtenberg.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Simmons. Here. Mr. Benoit.
Here.
Mr. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. Woodford.
Here.
Mr. Hanson.
Here.
Mr. Fishinger.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Oler.
Here.
And I, Sonia Santiago, here. Oh, microphone on, please.
He had it. There you go.
Counselor, your appearance, please, and good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Frank Vitolo, Sills, Cummins & Gross, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Peslock Acquisitions, LLC. It's nice to see all of you again. I was not here in the July meeting, and I understand I was ably substituted in for my colleague here, Josh Goudray. It's nice to know that if anything happens to me, he could always come in at a lower rate, which my clients really like. This meeting was carried from the July 22nd, 2024 meeting to the August 26th, 2024 meeting for scheduling purposes. It's been carried from August 26th to this evening without the need for additional notice. Before I introduce our first and only witness this evening, I just wanted to go over a couple matters that have occurred since the last meeting. On August 26th, we did submit Mr. Tobia's written outline of testimony that the board had requested. On August 30th, we submitted a written summary of Phase 1 and Phase 2 site assessments prepared by H2M Associates. And those reports were filed, should have been on file with the board at least 10 days in advance. I also wanted to address with the board that we did request Objectors Counsel to provide a copy of his stormwater expert's report and his planner's report. Mr. McBriar on November 27th, 2023. We do have the transcript site, did agree to provide a stormwater management report. We have not received that report. We also have not received a copy of the planner's report. And it's unfortunate because the reason we wanted those reports is to not have a situation like we do this evening where he's going to put on his testimony that we've never seen before. So it's very likely that we may need, unfortunately, another meeting depending upon how detailed that testimony is, what areas he goes into, et cetera, because it will be the first time we're ever seeing it.
So in other words, you're resuming your right to have a transcript of his testimony before, so you can provide any rebuttal if necessary.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. And we'll, if the chairman would allow, take a break after their affirmative testimony so we could discuss internally on how, we'd like to handle that.
That'd be great.
Yep. Okay, thank you, board. We are ready to proceed this evening. Our first and only witness is Mr. Michael Tobia. He is our professional planner.
Raise your right hand, Michael. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
And your full name for the record, please.
So it's Michael Tobia, Tobia. I'm the applicant's planning consultant.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Tobia, can you please give the board the benefit of your educational background and qualifications?
So, sure, I've been practicing for over 40 years now. I hold a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in the field of city and regional planning. As you know, I've made many appearances before this board in the past, as well as appearances before over 200 other planning boards, zoning boards, governing bodies in the state of New Jersey.
We would ask that Mr. Tobia be qualified as an expert in professional planning.
And your license is current, Michael?
License is current, yes, sir.
You're accepted as an expert.
And Mr. Tobia, before you begin, you've been in attendance at the prior 4 hearings and you reviewed the transcripts if you were not in attendance?
No, I've been to every meeting and heard all the testimony.
Great.
Ready? Okay. So let's go. we're going to start, first of all, good evening, everyone. I wish the chairman had called for this meeting to be held outside, with the weather we're having now, but we'll settle on being inside. We are going to start with Exhibit A11, which was identified on July 22nd by Mr. Shoma. That's what's up on the monitor now. And we're going to go through what I hope is about 20 minutes of testimony. We're going to brush off the basic plan. As you know, what we're asking for is subdivision approval, site plan approval, and use variance approval. More on that later. The idea is that Springbrook Country Club has approximately 4.74 acres of land they've deemed surplus and unneeded. They look to subdivide it off from their overall campus, which covers about 160 acres of land. Property is known as 9 Springbrook Road, and also Block 5801, Lot 1. The intended piece that's up on A11 now has about 600 feet of frontage on Springbrook Road. Nothing going on out there right now other than a gravel parking lot that you see. And the main identifier when you go out in the field is the fire department building and our voting booths on election day, which is right across the street from the parking lot. The rest of the site is undeveloped. Historically, this parking lot has been used for truck parking, utility truck parking. I saw some landscaper trucks out there recently. Most of the time, it's just a gravel surface parking lot. Okay, so on A11, let me click in, give us a little zoom here. This is our final plan that Mr. Schomer did explain twice now, second time being on July 22nd. It's now down to 13 lots. If you follow my pointer, what he designed was a widened road, 22 feet wide now, that culminates in a roundabout at the end of the road for easy turnarounds. This was reduced in density by 3 units, as you may recall, from the prior plan. It now shows 10 visitor parking stalls. It now shows a little community area with some benches and a mailbox and some green space. This works out to a density of about 1 home for every 15,800 square feet of lot area. The plan has been described by our architect, John James, as having 2 basic housing types of around 2,900 to 3,600 square feet in size. We've explained to you this is a unique product. Most important thing, I think, in the whole hearings, all the hearings so far, has been what Mr. Phillips shared with us a few meetings ago when he said, this is a different animal. Okay. Normally we see apartments, normally we see townhouses, we see a lot of single family cases before this board. This is a condoed single family home. First one that I know of in Morris Township, and something that you don't see in the area very much. It's designed to be the age appropriate alternative to a large lot, large houses in the town. It's designed for basically the empty nester who's looking for smaller space and still not be in a multifamily housing arrangement. There are sidewalks on both sides of the street now shown on A11. The vast majority of trees along Springbrook Road will be saved. Mr. Schomer has presented you with a landscape plan that shows nearly 200 new trees and evergreens being added to the site in full compliance with your tree replacement ordinance. This is a subdivision. So we're trying to create this parcel that you see, 4.74 acres, out of the existing country club landholding. On this side of Springbrook Road, there's also Fairway 13, Fairway 14, Fairway 15, which basically form a U around the proposed development. More on that in a moment. I'll show you an aerial of that. Although on this exhibit, you'll see Fairway 13 to the lower right of A11. Okay, zoning. We're in the OSGU zone. OSGU stands for Open Space Government Use. It's pretty self-explanatory as to intent and purpose. The zone permits a number of public land uses, including parks, playing fields, reservoirs, country clubs, government offices, pools, emergency squads, fire stations, even museums. That could all be built on this site. It permits colleges, such as St. E's on the east side of town. Importantly, it permits single-family homes. So what's being proposed here are 13 single-family homes. That's a permitted use in the OSGU zone. Okay, so we're not asking for our classic use variance, which is a use not permitted in the zone. Aside from that, the zone permits places of worship and schools. Those are permitted as conditional uses in the zone. The zone, at least in one section of the ordinance, does not permit cluster development. We struggled early on in this case to describe this use to ourselves. It's really not a cluster development. We're asking for a variance even if it was deemed that. This is the idea of putting all these homes clustered on one lot rather than subdivided onto 13 individual lots. That's what we call a conventional subdivision. Aside from that, we are asking for a density variance. And let me back up a second. In OSGU, single-family homes are permitted, as I said, but they're permitted pursuant to RA 130 zoning standards. RA 130 zoning is basically on the far west side of town, out Washington Valley, permits homes on 3-acre lots. You'll hear from me in a bit that 3-acre zoning in this section of Springbrook makes no planning sense whatsoever. So we're asking for a density variance because we can't meet the 3-acre minimum. And we're going to go with a density that reflects the surrounding area, which is all RA 15. The exact numbers are technically under RA 130 zoning. We'd only be able to build 1.58 units on this site, which would round down. You can only build one house on 5 acres. That would make sense in Washington Valley. Okay, RA 130 zones are basically located up against Mendham Township. In this area, the dominant zoning district is RA 15. That's 15,000 square foot lot size. We've seen a lot of apps in that zone. It's a big zone in town. So we are petitioning for 13 homes, whereas under current zoning, only 1 is permitted. There's another section of the ordinance, 95-38. It says you can only have 1 building on a lot. Okay. When we build single-family homes, we put 1 house on 1 lot. You don't put 2 houses on a lot. You don't put 3 on a lot. And that goes for every land use in town. Except if you drive through town, as you know, and you look at some of our townhouse sites, there are many townhouse buildings on 1 property. Apartment buildings such as James Street Commons has, I think, 3 buildings on 1 piece of property. The ordinance says you can only have 1. We're asking for a variance because this type of land use that you see on A11 will be precisely what's going on at every townhouse development in town and most of your apartment complexes. Multiple buildings on 1 lot, but under 1 management, 1 homeowner association, 1 maintenance plan, and so on. The ordinance even has a carve-out that says in certain instances, multiple buildings on a lot are permitted. This is exactly what they're talking about. Big selling point of this for empty nesters and anyone else who wants to buy in here is the homeowner association. that will allow all exterior site maintenance, snow removal, landscaping, sidewalk maintenance, road maintenance, and all repairs to be done by the HOA after they've collected fees from all the individual homeowners. So this is a lifestyle housing opportunity for those of us who have been pushing lawnmowers and raking leaves all our lives, adult lives as single-family homeowners. There are several RA 130 bulk standards that are not met by this applicant. We've ruled previously, Mr. Phillips agrees with me, they are subsumed into our request. Makes no sense to apply 3-acre bulk standards to small lots like this, small homes like this, I should say. Okay, so let's go, Frank, we're gonna ID another exhibit, a new exhibit. This is A12, has not been marked yet, Frank. It's an aerial photo. It has a date of May 16th, okay? We showed you this exhibit, sorry, let me get this. We showed you this exhibit when we were still proposing 16 lots. We never got around to showing it to you with 14 lots. It's a aerial photo of the neighborhood. Upper left is our concept plan. Okay, I think you all can see that. And I'll go back to the zoom on this in a second. The golf course runs on both sides of Springbrook Road. There are 15 holes to the north. They extend all the way into Morristown, incidentally. Clubhouse is more or less dead center on this exhibit. Armstrong Pond, the big water body you see just slightly left of center, is in front of the clubhouse. Then you cross Springbrook Road. On the other side is the parcel we were talking about. It has fairways. Let me zoom in a little bit here. It has fairways 13, which runs south and east of the subject property. Fairway 14, which returns eastward behind Hibson's Pond. And then hole 15, fairway 15, which then goes north, heads back to where you cross the street, get back over to the clubhouse. Subject property is in the upper center of this exhibit. It's basically flanked by Armstrong's Pond to the north, Hibson's Pond to the south. The land uses in the area are almost entirely single-family homes. Many of them are on Springbrook Road, Armstrong Road, Alvord Road to the east and south. We find a long stretch, as you all know, of residential properties along Mount Kemble. In this exhibit, Mount Kemble's at the top of the slide. I think I counted 90 homes, 90 residential lots on Mount Kemble Avenue, about 70 in the Springbrook neighborhood. All are A15 zoning. If you went across the street, across Mount Kemble to Skyline Drive, that's all zoned RA15 too. Huge subdivision, not really of influence on this site, but this is a big RA15 neighborhood. Note, please, if we moved southward across Old Harder Road, so the far southerly extreme of the property, there is a small RA35 zone, nice houses on it, Old Harder Road, and a couple of other streets. Really no influence on this particular piece of property, but I wanted you to know there is some other zoning in the area. All of Mount Kemble Avenue is zoned RA15 with the exception of now at least 3 multifamily developments along that road. Mountain Shadow, Springbrook Townhouses, and the redevelopment building redevelopment site up near Morristown, which I guess you all are calling Atlantic Health. So the street is basically all RA15. or scattered multifamily housing. Let's go for a second, because this is really good stuff. Okay, let me zoom best I can. This is from your 2017 master plan. I cut out a couple of sections to explain what we're up to with this unique application. First one, page 39, the second one, page 45. I'm only going to read to you what I've highlighted in the text. Page 39, the median age of Morris Township residents has increased from 40.9 in 2000 to 44.5 in the year 2015. An aging population may have an impact on housing preferences. For example, residents whose children have left home but would like to remain in Morris Township may wish to downsize to smaller single-family detached homes or seek other types of housing such as townhomes and apartment living. That's what this whole case is about, okay? Diversifying the housing stock, recognizing that although we've built a heck of a lot of townhouses and apartments in the area in recent years, there's still another way to go, which is non-attached, single-family homing, single-family housing under an HOA management. Let's go to page 45, same master plan. Just going to read highlighted stuff. Remember, there's more here that you can read if you like. In recent years, housing preference among two large demographic groups, the baby boomers and the millennial generation, has trended away from traditional large lot single-family housing. Go to the bottom of this excerpt, highlighted, although the planning board anticipates that the township will remain a predominantly single-family detached home community, it must still be cognizant of these changing housing preferences. As such, it should look for opportunities to promote diversity in the township's housing stock where appropriate. It's rare you get master plan language so directly on point with a particular application. But that's basically what we're up to here, okay? Let's,
Mr. Chairman, we'd like to mark this excerpt for these two experts as A13. All right, again.
it's in my outline, but you want
It's, yeah, I just was going to point that out. It's on page 8 of Mr. Tobias' outline. Why don't we just mark the outline? I mean, we have it, it's part of the application now. So let's mark the entire outline, all right, as
All right,
A13.
A13, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to our plan. So we're going to go back to A11. So we're on A11 again. And now I want to talk to you about the justification for the variances pretty quickly. Single-family housing is a permitted use in the zone. Okay, it's a permitted use in the zone. We're not arguing that. This was a townhouse application. We'd have to argue townhouses. If it was an apartment app, we'd have to argue why apartments are suitable. We don't have to do that here. We have to argue density and why this fits. If you look at my outline, we get guidance in the planning and legal community from the Grubbs case, Mr. Aller 289 NJ Super 377, deals exclusively with density cases. It says a couple important things. The proposed increase in density must promote purposes of the municipal land use law. Okay? And overall, the detrimental effect on the neighborhood should be compared between the density that's permitted and the density that's proposed. Here, what we're proposing, while higher than what's permitted, is entirely consistent with the neighborhood. Okay. Importantly, as I said before, When this site was in OSGU as a country club use, it deserved to be in the country club, in the OSGU zone. Once it's been removed, and the applicant has deemed it, or the country club has deemed it unnecessary and no longer needed, OSGU really doesn't make any sense anymore. It's no longer an open space use, it's no longer a governmental use, it's no longer a country club use. Our design challenge going back over a year now was to say what would work if we're gonna bag OSGU. And the answer was very simple. We're surrounded by RA 15 lots. RA 15 became the guiding light for the zone, for the site. This is not a rezoning. It's a request to focus on this tiny parcel in the context of the overall OSGU zone and build a site that complements the neighborhood. That's what the applicant's proposing. The density permitted is still higher than what would be permitted by RA 15. 15,000 square feet is what's permitted, 15,884 is what's proposed. So we're a little bit higher. Importantly, we address a goal of the master plan that says the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment should be promoted. We think this is blending in perfectly with the neighborhood and consequently promoting a good, safe, appropriate development for the Springbrook neighborhood. Importantly, as I just explained to you, by targeting empty nesters, what we call the boomers these days, even millennials, people basically without kids who don't need big houses, big lots, big yards. We're addressing a very specific master plan directive that says diversify your housing stock. This promotes the general welfare, which is another goal of the municipal land use law, goal A. Let's talk about residential cluster for a second. Back in the day, residential cluster meant subdivision application, looking to build, say, 15,000 square foot lots, would be allowed to reduce that 15,000 square foot threshold in this town down to about 11,000 square feet. That 4,000 square foot lot delta, when combined over all the lots in the subdivision, would, in theory and in practice, be smushed together on one side of the site and be used to create an open space parcel, playground, public park, whatever. So the trade-off was smaller lots get you more open space. We're clustering here. We're not clustering the way it's intended in the ordinance. There will be no individual lot lines. The open space here will be basically everything on the site other than the housing and the parking and the driveways. And remember, it's permitted in RA 15. There are even sections of this code that say it is permitted in the OSGU zone. Some conflict there. But again, it's permitted in every residential zone in the town in one way or another, including our neighboring RA 15 zone. For the reasons stated, we promote goals A, C, E, G, I, and M. I'd like to point out.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes, sir. Goals A, C, E, G, I, and M. I've discussed a couple of them. I want to share goal E with you.
Always start with A and go right to it.
So A,
because the members of the public can follow.
A says promote municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of lands in the state in a manner that will promote health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Remember what I just said, promote action to guide the appropriate use. Doesn't say the least dense use, it doesn't say the most popular use, it says the most appropriate use. And when we look at The dominant land use in the area, RA 15, single-family homes, we easily meet Goal A. Goal C, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but it says provide adequate air, light, and open space. I'll show you why we do that in a moment. Goal E is really important. Once again, it says promote the establishment of appropriate population densities. It says appropriate population density, not the lowest possible density, not the most popular population density, the appropriate one. We feel that's what we've done here with our 13 homes. Goal G basically says what the master plan says. Provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of residential uses. Goal I says promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. Indeed, when we had our architect here, Mr. John James, he did testimony that addressed section 5787.1 of your land development ordinance. That's the building design ordinance you adopted maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago now. I'm not the architect, but everything he described was about traditional architectural product, shutters, porches, side entry garages, pitched roofs, double hung windows, panel doors. And if you went through that section of your land development ordinance, you would see the architectural product is doing what we would call a desirable visual environment. Goal M, it says promote the more efficient use of land. This site right now is not being used. The way it's being used, when it is used, is for commercial parking. Doesn't look so hard. Commercial parking probably belongs up on Ridgedale Avenue. It's not an efficient use of land. The way we've laid it out, consistent with neighborhood trends and density, makes it vastly more efficient than what's out in the site now. So those are those goals, Mr. Chairman. A few other things going on here that I wanted to pull your coattails to. One, there will be a major contribution made by our applicants to your housing trust fund. Dollar amount still being worked out between our people and your staff. This is rateable heaven for the town. We estimate each home will probably be paying $20,000 a year or more in taxes. Typically, every municipal service, such as snow removal, sidewalk maintenance, and so on, will be taken care of by the HOA. Town DPW doesn't have to come to the site at all. We also know right now, we have a waiting list for these homes. 6 people are on it, 6 households, I should say. Consistent with what we expected. They're all empty nesters, and not one would be sending a kid to the local school system. Okay, that's what happens when you make houses smaller lots. You know, basically a small deck, no swimming pools, and so on. Most importantly, not a neighborhood that would have kids among its homes. We expect there to be nearly no public school age kids coming into the project. Note, I know a board member maybe 3 meetings ago said how many school kids are coming to this job. And so in the outline that I gave you, I used some standard demographic multipliers that we use for regular old single family homes. And I predicted 8 kids would come. That's a full-on worst case scenario. Last I checked, your school district had 5,000 kids in it, 5,200, something like that. Even if all 8 kids showed up, it would be a microscopic impact on the school system. Let me continue as I wrap up. You're going to hear there's an environmental cleanup going on the site. That's a good special reason. Mr. Schomer explained a water line loop will now be added to Springbrook to bring better pressure and redundancy to the public water supply connecting from Mount Campbell to the entrance to Springbrook. So all of Springbrook Road now, at this applicant's expense, will have a water line that will give you water coming in both ways into the neighborhood. We would work with the neighborhood on a welcome to Springbrook sign or signs, ornamental signs that we would place strategically in the area, maybe one, maybe two, at this applicant's expense, to help beautify the neighborhood. One second. Okay, so. So we're going to wrap up with a couple minutes on negative criteria. As all board members know, no variance can be granted if you're going to show a substantial detriment to the public good or a substantial impairment to your zone plan. What we have here, when you look at it, first of all, is an isolated site. Let me go back for a second to A12. Site is shown upper center of A12. When you go out in the field and you investigate this proposed development in the context of crowding, okay, are we getting too close to area homes? I've made some measurements. Our easterlymost unit, that's unit 1, is 700 feet from the home due east at the intersection of Armstrong, Springbrook Road. I think that's 3 Springbrook Road I'm talking about. 700 feet away. To see it from any home in that area of Armstrong Road, you would have to look across 2 fairways, 2 tree stands, and 700 feet before you saw unit 1 or unit 2. If you move southward a little bit, and from unit 2, I measured going south and east to the intersection of Springbrook Road and Alvord Road. Trying to give you a pointer here. That's roughly to the house at 11 Springbrook. It's 900 feet. Same remarks. Across 2 fairways, 2 tree stands to get to the nearest home. There is no visual impact from these distances. I also looked at a curiosity how we would affect Old Harder Road, which runs south of the site. So from the southerly edge of the site, measuring just to the edge of the property line of this parcel, it's 400 feet. House to house, from the nearest proposed house on our site to the nearest home on Old Harder Road is 700 feet. A lot of elbow room here. Normally we analyze setbacks 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, maybe 50 feet. Here we're measuring area separation in the hundreds. Back to A11, we also investigated the same thing with how we would affect people on Mount Campbell. Mount Campbell on this slide is shown on the far left of the slide. North is up, going toward Morristown. And you see our development, Springbrook runs across the top of this exhibit. There are only 2 homes that abut the proposed development site. One is about 110 feet away from the nearest home proposed on our site, that being unit 8. The other is 160 feet away, that being unit 9. We strike that unit 7. A lot of room there. If you look at RA 15, which only requires 25 feet of rear yard setback. Mr. Schomer explained, I won't get into it in detail, but dense evergreen plantings around the entire perimeter of the site, saving virtually every tree along Springbrook Road, which has a really nice canopy right now. Only a few trees near the proposed site driveway are being removed. So all in all, when you look at area separation, area impact, what's proposed here will have a very modest impact on life in the neighborhood. We're well below the RA 15 requirement for coverage. 45% is permitted, 31% is what's proposed. We're well below building coverage. 20% permitted, 14.9% proposed. This application will meet the height requirement of 35 feet for every home. I'd also say we estimate right now our base price on these units is $1.5 million a unit. When you look at visual impact, there's with this type of architecture, there's very little that's harmful about looking at a well-designed $1.5 million home. We don't see that as a detriment at all. I've explained school kid impacts to you. I wanted to close with a remark, and I think it was Mr. Benoit. Sorry if I'm wrong. 3 meetings ago, is this suburban sprawl? I don't know if you remember it.
I remember.
You do? It's not, okay? We're in a neighborhood where this is the existing development pattern. We're right up against the state highway. We got a public water line already in the street, public sewer line already in the street. We even have a fire department across the street, okay? Suburban sprawl would be if you took this out to Washington Valley, okay? To a lot where you had to extend a road a couple hundred feet into the woods, to an area where you didn't have water and you had to extend a sewer line, a water line, maybe hydrants, and build it out of context with the 3-acre zoning that's out there. Here we think this is a compact design and a compact neighborhood that just makes a lot of sense for everybody. And I'll stop right there for now. Mr. Aller, I will tell you, we've been taking notes. We have a list of proposed conditions. We're going to continue to take notes after the dialogue tonight. And if you're so inclined on approval, we'll be presenting you with a number of stipulations we've already offered at prior hearings.
Yeah, I have a pretty long list as well.
You do?
We'll compare notes.
Any questions?
I do. Mr. Tobia, you talked about the relative density of this project generally, but do you have any specific comparisons that you could tell the board about with respect to the density of this project as compared to maybe others in the vicinity?
And you're talking about actual density or zone density?
Actual density.
So I would tell you what's proposed here is basically 2.9 units per acre. A little bit more than 15,000 square feet per rooftop. Homes on Mount Kimball are probably less than that. You see a relatively high degree of lots less than 15,000 square feet. Springbrook neighborhood, you should know, has 15,000 square foot lots for sure, and many other lots in Springbrook and Armstrong that have larger lots. It's a fact. If you go up Mount Kimball and you get to a place like the Springbrook townhouses, they're about 7.2 units per acre. Sorry, folks. And townhouses generally go 6, 7, 8 units per acre. Condo flats or rental flats get into the double-digit densities. James Street Commons, I think, comes in at 12.9 units the acre. This is a very typical medium density for a suburban subdivision.
Yeah, Mr. Tobia, as the board recalls, and as you recall, we had a reset, I'll call it, in this application where we came back and proposed certain material changes to this project. Those changes were described, among other places, in a letter that we submitted to the board dated May 9th. It was from Mr. Schomer. I'm going to just let you look at this letter again. I want to get on the record, as a professional planner, the changes that we made, would you say those changes were beneficial to this development? And if so, how were they beneficial?
So, now, Josh, I don't know, could you, the 16 unit concept plan? We're going to show you an old exhibit we did 4 meetings ago. Was this A1, Josh? I'm sorry. We started out with 16 units. We had one long hearing. And basically what happened is we did a lot of stuff, okay, mostly in reaction to what the board is. Okay. So what's up on the monitor now, just so you can see, is A2, which is the 16 unit plan. I'm going to go to the 13 unit plan in a second. We went from 16 to 13 units. We had this pocket park, you all remember, up against Mount Campbell. We gave up on those lots. We had tension on how to park for them, how to walk to them, how to build sidewalks up there to those 2 lots. That was eliminated. You all remember we had a kind of a cul-de-sac in the middle of the layout. Mr. Chairman, this was your baby. Didn't make sense in the middle. We shoved it all the way to the end. We added visitor stalls. We added a pull-off for Amazon, UPS, FedEx deliveries. We added an amenity area. In this plan, A2, sidewalks were only on one side of the street. We went to both sides of the street. We did side entry garages throughout. This is one of your preferences in your building design guidelines. I think we only had a couple side entries before. All 13 now are side entry with a big back out behind it. We lowered lot coverage, we lowered building coverage, we lowered density, of course, and we widened the roadway width. The width of this road now, let's go to A11, okay? And so look at this, what do I do with that? That's 16 units, A2. And this is 13 units on a, so we were very responsive to suggestions from the board, concerns from the board. The roadway width was widened to 2 feet. It is now in excess of the state requirement, which is only 20 feet. So we're at 22. Moreover, Mr. Schomer deepened the parking stalls to 22 feet, even though they're only required to be 18 feet. That gives you a little bit more negotiating room and allows pedestrians to walk behind the parking spaces. So all those changes have been incorporated into this, among others.
And you would agree then, Mr. Tobia, that by incorporating these changes based on the feedback from the board, the public, as a planner, you would say that this is a better planned community than it was before?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't have any more questions for Mr. Tobia.
Board members, any questions?
I'll take a couple questions, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Tobia, you said that I get the narrative that it's going to be for downsized individuals, right?
Right.
And am I still correct that the units are roughly 3,500 square feet?
The number given by our architect was a range from 2,900, I think I said up to 3,600. So your
29.
number's at the high end of the range.
29 to 3,600. So a 1-bedroom apartment is usually about 700 square feet.
Yeah.
So we're looking at 6 1-bedroom apartments for somebody that's downsizing.
It's a great question. I know because I do a lot of work in Morristown, there are people downsizing 700 square foot apartments. You're absolutely right. There are also people, if you go out to the west side of this town, Harding, Mendham, all the larger lot communities, people downsizing from homes a whole lot bigger than 3,500 feet. So this is, like I said, diversifying the housing stock, trying something different is the angle here.
So now I get the narrative. So if we were pushing for downsized, folks to move into, wouldn't we go ahead and get the certification for a 55 plus community? If that was where our focus was.
Right. It's the applicant's strong preference not to do that. We think it's going to self-regulate that way anyway. That's why I call it age appropriate more than what you would say is age restricted. Okay, meaning head of household would have to be 55 years of age to walk in the door. We're going to try not to put that restriction on the project because we think it's going to self-regulate anyway.
Okay. I'm curious. I got a couple more questions. The OSGU zone, and when it was zoned that way, were there any concessions, any abatements? Do you know that? And I'm talking to the professionals here. I don't know if there were any concessions given when it was originally zoned OSGU zone. If it was, if you can only put a church, a school, or something, I'm just trying to figure out why we'd be making changes for no real impact, and it's not a hardship. I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to rationalize it in my head. But if any of you know, please let me know.
I wasn't around at the time this was originally.
You don't
placed in
say.
the OSG, but I'll speculate and give you my best professional judgment. It's actually, I think, quite simple, is that, OSGU is a zone that it includes clubs such as this with a golf course, and all other lands, including Morris County Golf Club, for example, are have been placed in OSGU, which makes logical sense. There are other parklands and so forth that are placed in OSGU. I would suspect that as part of the original placing it within that district, simply it was the lands that were owned and controlled by the golf course were placed within that district, and that includes these lands which the applicant is sort of characterizing as surplus acreage that are not needed for the functioning golf course.
Thank you.
And Mr. Williams, I totally agree with that. Let me tell you what OSGU really is, okay, quickly. St. Elizabeth's, Morris County Golf Club, Normandy School, Twin Oaks, Mo Beard, Freeling-Ison, Arboretum, Menon, the county, all those county land holdings on East Hanover Avenue, that's all OSGU. GU stands for government use.
All the county parkland in, near the Mendham border off of Mendham Road is in OSGU,
All OSGU.
in Washington Valley.
Jockey Hollow, Lewis Morris Park. There's a little Agoria Children's Park off of Cadena. This building is in OSGU. Police station's in OSGU. Luanica, the Armory down on Western Avenue, remember National Armory? That's what OSGU is about. And I think Mr. Phillips is right. Whenever the original zoning map was created for OSGU, I knew it was in country club land holdings. They put it in OSGU.
I have a question on the topic of OSGU. Since in your testimony, I believe you alluded to the fact that everything except the driveways, the housing, the roads was going to remain in OSGU. And what was the point of that? Was that just to sort of, to me, when I look at, obviously there's space that's still available other than the elements I just mentioned, which is the roadway, the housing, the driveways.
Right.
What else? All that space around the periphery, or what was the sort of point of that testimony?
I'm not remembering what I said or what you think I said.
Okay.
This subdivision is requested, okay, to carve this out of the entirety of the golf course holdings to create a lot just under 5 acres in land. Everything on the exhibit you see will be subject to that approval if you all are inclined to approve that. That doesn't just mean sidewalks and roads, but all the open space, all the plant material, the fencing, everything on here will be subject to the approval.
Gotcha.
I got you, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Just have one question.
Yes.
As an HOA, these are people purchasing into, I guess they're buying the individual home, which is part of an HOA. Do they have their own yards?
We do not.
They don't have a backyard.
This is, exactly. Now, there will be bylaws, okay? First of all, there are decks shown on Mr. Schummer's plan. If I zoom in here, let me see if I can show you one quickly. Okay, so unit 10, see that little striped area in the back? It's a deck. They all will have standard decks. Obviously, they will be for private use of individual homeowners. All the green grass, all the trees and everything will be part of a common area. From a practical standpoint, bylaws are going to be written maybe by Mr. Rotola's office, that are going to say you can't stand 5 feet behind your neighbor's house and look in the window because it's common open space. And remember, it's not what the cluster subdivision ordinance really conjured up. Really hard to place this into the ordinance because it's such a new use, unexpected. In fact, the master plan is written in 2017. This thing didn't even go into contract until 2021. Mr. Phillips had no idea the golf course was going to sell off this piece. So we couldn't have done anything at the master plan time to address this. But anyway, that's what's going to happen. The whole point of the thing is to do away with individual lot lines and individual lot responsibilities.
All right, thank you.
Any other board members with questions?
Just another question related to that. So therefore, there will be no intent to put fencing up between the different units to delineate. It's all kind of be blended property with different structures on one large property.
Yeah, amen to that. We really don't like that. And so we'll make that a condition if you want, but they're going to be bylaws. Matter of fact, I don't know, Mr. Aller, we could do draft, you could review it, that kind of thing.
I have a couple of questions when when the board's done about your potential setup.
Yeah, but the answer is yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would assume that any of the bylaws would be consistent with any conditions we put on the property.
Well, that would be a couple of things, and if the board were to vote in favor of the application, we'll run down conditions. There were several things that came up during the course of the hearings that would be part of the bylaws and the restrictions that are put in a master deed for any condominium. The word condominium brings to most people's mind a townhouse style unit, like multifamily living. And that's not what it is. A condominium is simply a form of ownership. It has nothing to do with the style or the look of the building. It could be just a block of air, right? So one of my questions to you would be, is that, well, let's just back up a little bit as to how the association is going to function here, okay? Because you said in your testimony that all of the exterior maintenance would be handled by the association. So I just want to confirm that the exterior of the buildings would be common elements and maintained by the association?
Okay, so I'm glad you asked that. All exterior maintenance will be the HOA's responsibility. Shoveling snow, cleaning up driveways, cleaning up driveway pads. The exterior shell of the house will be the individual homeowner's responsibility.
Okay, that's what I would have expected.
The
Okay.
way David, my client, just explained it, outside wall in
Right.
is for the homeowner to take care of.
Okay. including the deck. So we were talking about decks before. That's going to be part of the, call it a limited common element, however you designate it in your master deed, but that's 100% on the unit owner, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I would expect that the decks would have restrictions as to size and location.
Well, they're on the plan.
Right, but I mean, if somebody replaces a deck, it's going to be the homeowner's responsibility. They're still going to be bound by that footprint.
This, what happens, Mr. Aller can tell you this, but you're gonna have to go before the HOA and say, I want to rebuild my deck. Usually what happens with these jobs is all the decks get replaced at once, or all the roofing gets replaced at once.
Right.
But that won't happen
That won't
here
happen.
because you're putting that on the individual unit owner, homeowner, right? So,
Right.
Like unit one is for whatever reason, a direction of the facing of the house towards the sun, a particular direction, his roof, maybe wears out sooner, who knows, right?
Right.
But that person can replace his roof without going to the board, right? I'm seeing a no from the client here.
To
from
this
your
board,
client.
you're saying.
No, not to our board, to the HOA board, right? He's gonna be able to replace his roof because he needs a new roof. That's not going to the association. I'm just trying to I think I understand what you want to do. I just want to be sure the board is clear because they have a few questions on the operation. It's not something that you typically see, the single family condominium. So, I've done them where I create a box, literally an air box, and you put everything in the box and that's yours, you own it. So just a little more explanation for the board as to how they're maintaining the buildings.
Say the homeowner wants to replace his roof, it's got to go to the board. Not this board, the HOA board.
Right.
It's going to be a strong HOA, which will probably have an architectural review component on it. So that's what, listen, this, Mr. Aller, this becomes another form of government.
Yeah, and it's not my favorite form, to be honest.
Say it again?
And not my favorite
I
form.
know,
So,
I know.
it's just, the type of ownership is really up to the applicant, how they want to designate what's a unit or not. I'm just trying to explain to the board what your thoughts are so they have a good understanding of who's going to maintain the exterior of the house. We get the grass and the streets, and maybe the driveways, the sidewalk leading up to the front door. But when the front door is, 20 years old and it has to be replaced, it's on the unit owner typically, right? So does that unit owner have to go to the board to say, I want to replace my door? I guess that's what you're hearing, right?
Usually what happens also is the door is specified as to what door can be replaced there. So
Yeah, sometimes there's color restrictions, right? That type of thing.
listen, I've heard HOAs say no American flags can be hung outside the door.
Yeah, but that was in 1980, it was all kind of new then, right? But since then, there's actually a law that says you can't restrict the flying of the American flag. So, right, other flags, maybe not, but the American flag, you can't restrict. So I'm just, for
I
the
think
board's
it's-
sake, Michael, just in a few words, just who's maintaining the exterior of the building and do they have to go to the HOA to get approval?
Homeowners maintaining it, yes, they have to go to HOA.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in your typical neighborhood of single-family homes, of course, everybody does their own thing. They have their own colors. I mean, there are so many regulations, as you know, in these HOA documents. It is a way to police consistency in your neighborhood. So everyone's going to have, they're going to abide by the rules, and neighbors, fortunately or unfortunately, police whether or not neighbors are following the rules. So you will, particularly in a development where we expect over 55, people are going to want some consistency, and they're not going to be going crazy wanting to paint their house a different color, et cetera. So I think it works for us in this kind of neighborhood to have an association with
Okay.
pretty
So
strict
can we
rules.
go back to the welcome sign? Where, you said something about a welcome sign that says welcome to Springbrook. Where would that be and who would have maintenance responsibility for that?
So I can address, we are going to, and the testimony from the prior meetings were that we would work with the neighborhood to locate the sign or where they deem most appropriate. Who that is in the neighborhood, if you guys would like to make the engineer, the planner, that person, because there is no neighborhood leader, we're certainly amenable to that. We'll work with whoever knows the most or has responsibility for that neighborhood. Maybe it's the council person, whomever you
I was just
guys.
wondering whose property will be on, there's
Yeah.
zoning restrictions. You may end up back here to get a
And
sign.
we're gonna take on the effort and the cost to do that. So
Is it anticipated that the association would maintain that sign and replace it?
I think we're happy to do that. Yeah,
Okay.
we're happy to do that.
All right, so that would be, a condition, right? That
Correct.
And that would be in your restrictions in your master deed, right?
Yes.
I didn't have any other.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, yes, it probably would have to be, I don't know if there's any
Well,
setback lines where we can put signs in there without coming back here or getting county approval if it's along a county road. I think it's James Street a county road?
Yeah.
So they'd have to get county approval, so it could be a whole new deal, because you have to put it either on somebody's property,
So,
they're gonna get approval, or,
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the way we would do this is, as a condition of approval, we would present an analysis of the lands around this property, and to identify any spots where a sign is feasible, and then you guys can, whoever you assign, can work with us to place it where you think it's best. But we would do the legwork, so we'll look to see, what kind of restrictions on the lands around the property exist.
so Paul and Dave, you think that would go to TCC initially to? I'm just thinking there might be some zoning restrictions, right?
Yep.
there'd be zoning, restrictions.
Yeah.
Either-
Yeah, size, all the issues.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you do see these signs around.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're certainly around, so.
yeah.
Yeah, most of those neighborhoods all have like some areas for an entranceway where there's somehow they've been put in.
Right.
I know our neighborhood on the new sheet has the two signs. But, they've been in there for a long, long time.
Yes,
So I just want to make sure that it doesn't impinge on any other person
of course,
trying to locate these signs.
of course.
Okay. Well, any other board members with questions? Professionals, any questions?
I do.
Yes, please.
So, Michael, to your knowledge, are there any other excess lands that currently exist as part of the Springbrook Country Club that could or would potentially be available for development, or is this it? And by that, I mean sort of perimeter buffer lands that are not needed either for golf holes or the protections from stray bulls and all that.
The answer, Paul, is I don't know. Okay. I was brought into this after this site was identified by the country club. I did no facilities planning with the rest of the country club.
Paul, if this goes another night, we'll get an answer to that for you.
Okay. And the other thing, I just want to make sure, and I've read your outline and heard your testimony, and I think it's clear that in your opinion, this application involves both a D1 and a D5 variance, correct?
Correct.
And my understanding, correct me, the D1 relates to the fact that what's being proposed is not a product, for lack of a better word, that's allowed in any zone in Morris Township, meaning multiple single-family dwellings on a single lot. There's provision for multiple multifamily dwellings, as you point out in your outline, but I don't believe that it's allowed for single family. I just want to make sure you concur.
I concur exactly.
Okay, having said that, do you believe that the applicant needs to address the requirements under Medici for the D1? And by that, I mean both the particular suitability test and the reconciliation test. And let me just follow that up and you can answer. If you believe the answer is yes, then, and I think you touched on both of these to some extent. But in light of my first question about whether there are any other excess lands, I think it would be helpful if you could buttress the testimony as to why these lands are so particularly suitable for this use so as to advance the public welfare, consistent with Medici, and also under the reconciliation test, recognizing that this zone only foresees either continued golf course use or, one unit on 3 acres. How do you reconcile that with the legislative intent? I think you started to get into this. What have changed circumstances, uniqueness here?
Right, okay, that's a lot, Paul, that's a lot. First of all, particular suitability is easy to meet, okay? Because we're surrounded by this massive RA 15 zone. It is a microscopic portion of the OSGU zone. I calculated this site incidentally to be slightly more than 1/10 of 1% of your OSGU zone. Okay, this is why we have a Board of Adjustment. Okay, it was 10% of the OSGU zone. Mr. Phillips would have a heck of a master plan study to do, and you don't have to study the whole golf course. Variances are designed for special situations. We have that here. I don't think, Paul, we have to reconcile this omission with the ordinance. This is a single-family use in a single-family zone. And what Medici was focused on was just that. Wasn't focused on a density variance, wasn't focused on multiple houses on one lot. It was focused on what I'd call alien land uses, right? Someone proposing a gas station in a residential zone. This is a much lower burden of proof, I feel, than a totally non-permitted use in a zone.
So just so I understand, you don't feel you need to put in any proofs on reconciliation in terms of changed circumstances or what the planning board may have overlooked in the designation of this property for golf course use?
Let me go through a couple that I said anyway, okay? You did the master plan for the planning board 2017. This piece goes under contract 4 years later. You didn't know it was coming. We didn't know it was coming. So it was impossible for the master plan to contemplate anything with the country club. Country club, by the way, in the master plan, it's virtually silent on the Springbrook Country Club. No policy recommendations, no zoning, it's silent. Because I think the expectation then was the country club was going to keep on trucking, just where it was. So this came out of left field. I loved what you said a couple of meetings ago. And this relates to the reconciliation test also. This is a different animal. As housing types go, we never saw it coming. This is why you have the use variance mechanism. What Medici says in that Supreme Court decision is perhaps the use was not known or not anticipated at the time the last master plan was prepared. That's what we're talking about here. So I think that addresses your question and the Medici decision.
That's fine. And just for the record and for your edification, which is why I asked the first question about whether there are any other excess lands here, which to me goes to both the potential to demonstrate particular suitability as well as to do the reconciliation test with regard to changed circumstances or something someone may not have normally been aware of, such as that these lands were excess at the time. Right, that's just for purposes of the board's edification as well. That's all I had, Mr. Woodford.
I have a question. If I recall correctly, Medici also says that a Board of Adjustment is not supposed to create zones. Is that correct?
Plainly correct. We're not supposed to do rezonings here.
Right. I mean, for instance, when there was a short-lived proposal before this board concerning development of a over by Madison Hotel. one of our concerns was, what are the standards we apply? So my question is, what are the standards that we should apply to this type of development? And how do we reconcile that with the Medici that we're not supposed to create zones?
Well, I think your planner just asked me those same basic questions. Thing over near the hotel, I was on it, was a, really big building, on a very complicated piece of property. I think the resistance we had to that early on was, should we examine that whole neighborhood? All those office buildings over there, the hotel and so on. And it veered off into the subject of whether that should be considered for rezoning. Here, I'll repeat, this is a really small piece of property in the context of the country club and in the context of your overall OSG use, zone. This is why we have a board of adjustment. Special situations, changed circumstances, unanticipated land uses.
Any other board members with questions? Any other questions from board professionals? Mr. Oler, any more questions?
I have no questions. No.
All right, should we take a break or open up the public now? Let's open it up to the public now. Are you okay? You're good? All right. Members of the public, any questions?
Can we take a couple minute break?
Sure, that's what I did.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, turn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, appreciate it.
And we're about to cross-examination of the two.
Thank you, Mr.
Before
Chairman.
that, Mr. Chair, I have two things.
Sure.
The first thing I wanted to say is, based on Mr. Williams' question on 55 and older, I did discuss with the client, and, it is really a distinction without a difference. So we will agree to a 55 older designation on the development. So thank you for that suggestion. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that we did have a representative from the golf club here, and they are not looking, we can confirm, they're not looking to sell off or subdivide any other portions of the golf course. So I wanted to make those two things clear. And then before we start the cross, Mr. Chair, I did have one follow-up for our witness. Can I ask?
Sure.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, Mr. Tobia, you had testified on direct about your analysis under the Medici test, particular suitability, and then you got a question from the planner, Mr. Phillips, and in going over my notes, I was just a little bit confused. So if you would, could you just one more time take the board through the particular suitability test in the context of this cluster type development with multiple buildings, if you would?
Sure. Okay. The cluster thing, remember, is permitted in every residential zone in the town, aside from our OSGU. Okay. When I talk particular suitability, I'm impressed that it's permitted in RA 15. That is the cluster. It's permitted in RA 35 to the south, not nearly as influential on this site, but it's permitted every place. We're the hole in the donut. Okay, it's permitted across now Kemble Avenue, Skyline Drive. Can't happen in a lot of these neighborhoods now because they're fully developed. But cluster is permitted in the most influential zone in the area, RA 15. Why is it also useful and particularly suited? Master plan says it wants diversification of housing. Clustering is one way we diversify housing. I won't go through the master plan slide again, but that's one way we do it. If you look at the overall site, the individual site, and how it relates to clustering as well as to the multiple buildings on one lot, it's a great piece of property. You've heard in prior testimony, we have no floodplains, we have no wetlands, It's basically a flat site, minimal grade change as you move through this site, east to west and north to south. We're supplied by utilities. We're supplied by a great road, Springbrook Road, state highways nearby. And we are unique perhaps in the whole town with the amount of open space buffering that surrounds us and protects any possible impacts from what clustering would do to the neighborhood. Another thing that comes up in Medici, let's go through this a little bit more. Variances can be granted under Medici if we demonstrate the community has changed. Variances can be granted if we can demonstrate that the use is new or was not anticipated at the time of the last master plan. Both apply here. Community has changed, as the master plan points out, by the steady aging of township population and area population. Aging speaks to what's being built here, especially now with an age restriction proposed. The use is new, could not have been anticipated a few years ago, nor could the sale of the property have been anticipated a few years ago. These are all changed circumstances under Medici.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tobia.
You got it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to ask if any board members have questions. Any board members have questions? Any professionals with
I
questions?
do not.
Since we do have a representative of Springbrook here, I'm looking at this for the 18,000th time, looking at this exhibit up there on the board, and there's trees along the property line that are going to remain a part of the Springbrook Country Club. Are they going to maintain those trees and keep them there as part of the buffer to protect anybody that might be in the backyard from golf balls?
So everything you see on this exhibit, Mr. Chairman, is on our property.
Including the like the 4 or 5 trees that are outside the property line?
Tell me, north, south, east, or west? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Top, bottom. left,
Along the
right?
south, down along the bottom,
Bottom
Michael,
right.
yeah,
That is sort of a-
those trees right there. Yeah.
That's all, okay, so the heavy line you see here, Mr. Chairman, is the property line.
Right, and they're all on the other side of the property.
So there, oh, I see what you're saying. There are white pines on the other side of that line,
Right.
40, 50 feet high. You're correct. Those would be country club responsibility.
Right,
They're on their property, not ours.
right, but are they gonna, because I'm worried about people sitting in the backyard and getting clobbered by a golf.
So
And that's
glad you
why-
asked. You know, one thing we, I don't know where I could.
I know how I take golf.
So we've heard about that, Mr. Chairman, and so the way it was explained, you want to call someone or what do you want to do? Oh,
Yeah, so the representative from the golf club is in the back, but he just did relay to us that they're going to keep those trees and maintain them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Any other questions? We can start with Ross today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, professionals and staff. As you know, my name is Robert McBriar. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Skank, Price, Smith and King, and we represent a group of concerned citizens who oppose the pending application. Mr. Tobia, welcome. I have a few follow-up questions before I think or I anticipate there'll be no other experts on the applicant side. We do have 2 experts in attendance on the opposition side. But before we get to them, Mr. Tobia, sticking with the precise language of the OSGU zone, you testified that cluster residential development is expressly prohibited in the zone, correct?
Yes.
And you also testified that land developed for single-family residential use in the OSGU zone must comply with the RA 130 zone requirements, correct?
Correct.
And there are no provisions in the OSGU section that authorize substituting the requirements of the RA 15 zone for those set forth in the RA 130 zone. Is that correct?
That's why we need the variance. Right, Mr. McBriar. Right.
have you performed any analysis or investigation into how the OSGU zone is currently used? I know you had a pretty in-depth list of properties that I assume comprise the OSGU zone. Can you tell us a little bit more about the analysis that you performed in that regard?
So, sure, down the hall, you can get a printed zoning map from the planning office. I got one. I went through every OSGU district on that map, identified them all either from memory or looking them up, and that's how I came up with that long list I shared with you before.
And in a memo, there was a memo that's available on the municipality's website. And it's a memo to the Township Planning Board from the town planner dated February 23rd, 2021. And that was a memo regarding the OSGU zone. Are you familiar with that memo? What's interesting to note in that memo is that it was observed.
Do you have a copy of that memo with you?
It's, yes.
So it'd be nice if the witness could add that memo to his disposal if he answers questions.
Of course.
I would also like to see it, Mr. Chair.
It is available online on the
Well,
municipal
my
website.
computer doesn't have services, so you're gonna have to give it to us.
I don't have an extra copy, but I do have a copy. I'm just going to reference some data in that, Mr. Chairman, and then I'll give it to council to review.
We'll give it to council review and then you can ask the question.
Yeah, and just back up again, who's the memo from?
This is it's the Morris Township Planning Board from Mr. Phillips dated February 23rd, 2021. It's regarding proposed zoning amendments, OSGU, open space government use zoning district.
I'm sorry, and the date again?
February 23rd, 2021. Oh, you have?
Frank, when you're done, I'm going to mark that too.
You can mark it 01.
No, it's going to be an 05. Yeah.
05. On page 2 of the
Mr.
memo.
Chair, this is a like 15-page document. I don't, this certainly wasn't issued in connection with this application. I mean, I haven't had a chance to look. I would give it to you, but I got to read it. It has tables and details. I don't know what where he's going with it, but here you go.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so 05 is a pretty lengthy memo. It consists of pages aren't all numbered, but 15, 16-page document, right? Dated February 23, 2021. Memo to the planning board from Paul Phillips, Township Planner. And you have a question to Mr. Tobia based on that document?
Yeah, there's data contained in that report that I think bears directly on tonight's testimony.
All right, we'll object to this document. Look, I do depositions my whole life. If you put a document in front of a witness that's 20 pages long, you got to give them time to look at it.
Well-
I mean, you can't pluck a quote out of a document and say,
Right.
what do you think about this? That's prejudicial, and he's got to have a chance to look at it. It's not in the record.
I agree with you.
It's now in the record for the first time,
Right.
so, we can't look at it either right now. So, I mean, you can ask a question if he can answer, he may not be able to answer. And
If
that
you
would
can't
be,
answer it, then we're gonna have to move on.
Okay, I have a continuing objection to even asking the question about it. I mean, we could put the Bible into the record, and they can ask about one psalm in it. So, I mean, you got to give someone a chance to review the document.
Well, let's give him the document. If he can answer the question that's presented by reviewing a portion of the document, or if he needs more time. If not, we'll have to, hopefully we'll get done with Mr. Toby tonight, but let's move it along and let him ask this question, and then we'll see where it goes.
And
I understand your objection.
Mr. Chairman, there's just a pointed question based on data that was produced by the planner. And that data on page 2,
Well, we'll give him the quiet, well, at least give him the benefit of having that document in front of him. So, that'd be great.
Where you at, Mr. McBride?
Thank you. The table on the bottom of page 2, that table is described as land area within the OSGU zone. I just wanted to draw your attention to that table because the board planner had noted that 74% of the land in the OSGU zone is used for public property. And on the other end of the spectrum, only 3% of the land in that zone is used for approved residential. Do you believe that that speaks to the OSGU zone, its intent to limit residential development in the zone?
Objection, continuing objection to use of this document. You can answer if you know.
Are you asking him for his opinion as to what Mr. Phillips was saying?
Yeah, was that significant? It's significant that only 3% of the entire OSGU zone, which comprises approximately 2,300 acres, is allocated to approved residential use.
Let me, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, let me say this. I'll look this over. I'm coming back, right? You're coming back. Try and give you a better answer next time. Fact of the matter is OSGU permits residential. I know you said 3%. I don't know what the number is, but it permits it. And that's what we're proposing.
Did you perform any studies or analysis regarding the proximity of the subject site to building sites or districts having any historical significance?
No,
Are you aware that the neighborhood across Mount Kimball Ave is identified in the master plan as the Prudent Town Historic District?
yes,
And are you aware that this district is on the state and national registry of historic places?
I am.
Was that an element you think would be beneficial for the public or the board to know in connection with its review of this application?
No, it's a nice historic district. I'm familiar with it because of a prior app, Mr. McGuire. This site is so isolated. It's so well buffered. And by the way, I didn't mention, but thank you. We're roughly 20 feet below the grade of Mount Kimball. Comes way down. Mount Kimball drivers and people living up there going to basically be looking over this site. We're not doing anything to compromise historic integrity up on Mount Kimball.
And similarly to the south, there's a Morris County noted district known as Springbrook Historic District. Do you have any analysis or commentary on that
I've
district?
seen it on the map, that's all I know.
Are there any immediately surrounding neighborhoods that are also incorporated in the HOA form of ownership?
The multifamilies.
And where,
One is called Mountain Shadow, south of us by, on Mount Campbell. I'm just guessing, okay, maybe a mile south. Springbrook Townhouses to the north, like 2,100 feet. North, meaning heading toward Markstone.
and just to confirm, the development is private, correct? Not open to any members of the public?
Correct.
All right. I have nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Can I just, Mr. Chair, ask Mr. McBriar a question? If he has an updated list of his members that I could see?
It's on file with Santiago.
So it hasn't
That's one.
changed?
No.
Okay, so the one we have, it was July 12, 2024, it was marked 04.
Okay, so has been no changes since then?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
Any other members of the public with questions? Being none, hearing none, close the public portion.
Mr. Chairman, we would reserve our closing argument following their case.
Oh, obviously.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we intend to introduce and qualify two witnesses. The first, Stephen Duda, professional engineer at Princeton Hydro. You can swear him in.
Okay, he's been.
Yeah, why don't we seat him there? Michael, if you don't mind, you can vacate that spot.
And Council, you can go over there too, so you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Toby.
Okay, would you, before you get too comfortable, would you stand and raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
And your full name, please?
Stephen Andrew Duda,
And spell your last name?
D-U-D-A.
Thank you, Mr. Duda.
Mr. McBriar, if it's easier, you can sit right next to your witness.
Thank you. Mr. Duda, can you give the board the benefit of describing your professional qualifications and educational experience?
Yes, I graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Rowan University in 2013. I have a professional civil engineer's license with New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New York. I received my first license in 2022. Prior to being licensed, I worked at a land development firm as an EIT, where I worked under engineering training, I'm sorry, EIT. Worked under multiple PEs, under their supervision. I designed multiple residential and commercial land development applications. They were in Egg Harbor Township, Egg Harbor City, Galloway, Absecon. I also assisted in the reviews of land development applications in the capacity of a township engineer. It was also under the PE. Those were performed in Hamilton Township, Atlantic County, Hamilton, Morris River Township, Brigantine, and there was a few others. While with Princeton Hydro, I've designed stormwater BMPs for multiple grant projects, notably Reddington Township. And I've also completed expert witness reviews in Hamilton Township, Mercer County, White Township, Robbinsville, and Logan Township. This spring, I also taught a continuing education class through Rutgers for engineers to get their annual credits. on infiltration stormwater management techniques.
And have you been accepted as an expert in, before any other county planning boards?
Yes, I was accepted as an expert with Mercer County Planning Board.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no objection, we'd ask that Mr. Duda be accepted and recognized as an expert in the field of professional engineering.
Councilman, any objection?
I do have one question, voir dire question. Is that appropriate? You listed off a lot of projects, most of them down the shore. You said you've been a licensed engineer for 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, so how many projects have you done in those 2 years as a licensed engineer?
We are not a land development firm, so we do not do land development.
Okay, so you've done no projects as a licensed engineer.
I perform grant calculations for stormwater BMPs for grant projects.
Right, but you haven't done any of the projects you described before. Those were all prior to you being a licensed engineer.
Correct.
So none of those were done while you were a licensed engineer, which you got in 2022, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Who accepted as a professional engineer?
Thank you. Mr. Duda, have you reviewed the most recent set of plans and reports submitted by the applicant?
Yes, my review is focused on the site plan and the stormwater calculations.
And in your review, what are your thoughts regarding these existing inlets within the Springbrook Road area?
The inlets and the streets have pipes that extend into the property. The plans don't make it clear whether those pipes convey water from the property to the street, or if it conveys water from the street into the property. So in the most recent plan revision, there was actually a note that was added that states the grate and pipes were not survey located. Another note states that the location is to be verified and realigned as needed. And also, I attended a previous meeting, and there was a note that the plans were to be removed. It's kind of contradictory to the plans. So, I'm not sure exactly what's going to be happening with those pipes.
And in your opinion, is that problematic?
Yes.
On what basis?
So potentially, the basin location shown on the plans, the existing pipes could be, they are proposed or below proposed homes. As stated, the existing planned or pipes are to be realigned. This could be an issue because it seems like it's not known what flow direction those pipes have, or the capacity, or the pipes are there for something. Where does it accept water from? Where does it convey water to? And this is a design issue that has to be addressed now in the design phase. It shouldn't wait till construction.
And in your opinion, has the applicant submitted all the information required for a thorough review of the stormwater management plan?
No, in review of the documents, I don't see any soil tests. Typically, when you have a land development, you have soil profile pits and infiltration testing. The stormwater report actually states at one point that for the purpose of analysis, a maximum on-site infiltration rate of 1 inch per hour is used.
And what do they mean by an on-site infiltration rate?
So for the peak rate calculations, they use the option for the peak rate to be less at any given time. Most of the time, other applications use the peak rate reduction. That's important because in this model, they're assuming that the stormwater basin has 1 inch per hour of infiltration. So when you have this hole in the ground in a basin, as water comes in, and it's now going into the ground. It's going into the ground 1 inch per hour over the whole bottom of the basin. If that can't happen for some reason, it's going to affect your peak rate compliance. Additionally, they have they perform what's called a groundwater mounting analysis. Without the infiltration rate, you're not sure how that analysis can't be performed. And without soil tests, you also don't know where the seasonal high water table is.
Can you expand a little bit more on what is meant by exfiltration rate?
Yes, so the exfiltration rate is the rate that's used in a model for when the soil accepts the water from the basin. If that's not calculated correctly, the peak rate from the basin couldn't increase, and it would severely impact the site's ability to be compliant with peak rate reductions.
In your opinion, will the infiltration rate seriously impact the size of the groundwater mound?
Yes, if the infiltration rate is slower, the mound will be impacted.
Can you describe or elaborate a little bit more on the groundwater mound?
So when you have a hole in the ground, your basin, you're infiltrating water through the basin, as their model shows. Underneath your basin, you have the existing groundwater table. Since you are concentrating the infiltration below that basin, you're actually creating a temporary rise in the water table below the basin.
And how does the infiltration rate of a soil impact the ground mound?
The slower the rate, generally the taller the groundwater mound.
And why is that important in the design of a stormwater basin?
Based on Chapter 12 of the Stormwater BMP Manual, if your groundwater mound breaks out of the bottom of your basin, as in you have the rise in the groundwater table, goes above the bottom of your basin, it severely impacts the ability of the groundwater to infiltrate.
And did the design engineer perform a groundwater mounding analysis?
Yes, he did.
Can you elaborate more on that?
So based on his analysis, he used, again, 1 inch per hour for the recharge rate. And based on their calculations, the groundwater mound height varies from 3.6 to 9.6 feet.
And if the infiltration rate was less than 1 inch an hour, the mound would be higher or lower?
Higher.
And since soil testing wasn't performed, is there any type of a resource you can use to assist with estimating the infiltration rate or the elevation of the seasonal high water table?
Yes, Chapter 12 of Stormwater BMP Manual, that's the soils chapter, soil testing chapter. It discusses using the USDA NRCS web soil survey. It's basically a web page. You go online, select your project, and it gives you just general soil parameters for where you're at. You still have to perform soil tests on the site, but it gives you a general idea.
And did the applicant provide a printout of the web soil survey in their report?
No, they did not.
Did you perform an analysis of the web soil survey?
Yes, I did.
And what did you find?
So the western portion of the site consists of Cokesbury, Gravelly Loam. Some of these names are going to be, sound weird. And the eastern side consists of Whippany Silt Loam.
And what were the infiltration rates shown in the web soil survey for the site soils?
Both soil types are supposed to have saturated hydraulic conductivities of 0.06 inches per hour to 0.2 inches per hour.
And what infiltration rate did the design engineer use in his analysis?
Of 1 inch per hour.
And did the web soil survey also include information for the depth to seasonal high water table?
Yes, the Cokesbury Gravelly Loam, based on web soil survey, is supposed to have a depth to seasonal high water table of 0 to 12 inches.
And what is the minimum separation between the seasonal high water table and the bottom of the basin?
I forgot to add for the previous question, Whippany Silt Loam is supposed to have a depth to seasonal high water table of 6 to 18 inches.
Again, I'll just repeat my last question. What is the minimum separation between the seasonal high water table and the bottom of the basin?
So the minimum separation is 24 inches.
And if the depth to the seasonal high water table is less than the 24 inches, how will they have 24 inches of separation between the bottom of the basin and the seasonal high water table?
They won't. And specifically, when you're talking about the mounting calculation, that mound is added to the seasonal high water table. So they have, one of the soils has 0 to 12 inches. You now have to add the groundwater mound to that height. So it was 3.6, 9.6 feet. That would be added to the seasonal high water table.
In your opinion, will the applicant still be required to perform soil testing after the desktop analysis?
Yes, Chapter 12 is very clear. It states the amount of soil tests that you need to perform within each BMP. It's not even just on the site. The tests have to be performed within the bottom of each basin.
And what is your final opinion on the project's compliance with the stormwater ordinance?
So soil testing is a requirement for the design of any stormwater BMP. Without soil tests, the applicant has not demonstrated the basins will function. Additionally, a desktop study has determined that the use of 1 inch per hour as an infiltration rate is much faster than what can be expected on a site. The actual infiltration rate in the site could be as low as 0.06 inches per hour. If this is the case, the groundwater mound would be much higher than calculated. The desktop analysis also showed the depth of seasonal high water table isn't deep enough to maintain the required separation for an infiltration BMP. Additionally, since the 1 inch per hour infiltration was used in the peak rate calculations, it is very likely the project will not meet the peak rate requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Gita. If there are any questions from council or members of the board?
Chelsea, you go first.
Even if he spoke half as fast, I would have no idea what he was talking about. So, I mean, I got to look at a transcript to figure out all that word salad. I really do. I lost him. We need time. I mean, we could take a break and see if we could. Yeah. So can you give us maybe 5 or 10 minutes to see if we can cross this witness? Because I'm not the engineer, so I can't. Maybe my engineer is like super genius. He got all that and can ask questions, but.
Can I ask one question? Have you done any site testing yourself on this site?
Yes, I have.
And what do those tests consist of?
Oh, on this site?
On this site?
No, we were not permitted on the site, so no, I
Did
have
you ask
not.
for permission to get on the site?
I have not.
I mean, that was part of my cross, but I mean, I need to ask my civil, what he got here. And I apologize, but I told you this would happen. So, yeah, okay.
As council, we did ask that any experts who would be testifying submit their reports in advance so that council and the board would have a chance to review them. Because I know this means a lot to a lot of people, and it's only fair that it be done thoroughly. So yes, you can take your 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, looks like you have the roll call.
Thank you.
Mr. Goldberg,
Here.
Mr. Trachtenberg,
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Here.
Mr. Simmons,
Here.
Mr. Benoit,
Here.
Mr. Kramer.
Here.
Mr. Woodruff,
Here.
Mr. Hanson,
Here.
Mr. Fishinger,
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Oler,
Here.
and I, Sonia Cynthia Rozier.
Okay. Council, you can proceed.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So what I did confer with my clients and my experts, and we do want to reserve on cross-examining these witnesses, so we have more time to prepare. We don't have any problem if they want to put on their planner as well, so we can get through that testimony. But we're writing furiously back there. There's a lot of facts and figures, and we do need some time to check out what
Yes,
the grounds
review
for his
all the,
testimony. Correct.
the data that was.
Correct.
down, yes. Okay, I agree with you on that score. So does any other member of the public wish to ask any questions at this time of this witness? If so, come up to the microphone.
Well, wait, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that you're not represented by Mr. McBriar. You're not on his list of people? Yes, she's not.
She's on.
She's on it?
It's on.
Are you on?
Okay.
No,
No.
we didn't need to go through council. Okay. Does any board member have, I should say, any board members have any questions? Or do you want to wait until council completes his cross-examination? All right, we'll also reserve until after your cross-examination.
Great. Our next witness is Michael Pesolano.
Okay.
Mr. Pasolano, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help
I
you God.
do.
Your full name for the record, please?
Michael J. Pesolano, that's Pessolano, licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey. Business address 140 Elmwood Avenue, Pagoda, New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Pesolano. Can you briefly describe your qualifications and educational experience for the board?
Yes, gladly. I've been practicing professional planning at the municipal level exclusively for the past 40-plus years, originally licensed as a planner in New Jersey in 1984. Like Mr. Phillips, I graduated from Hunter College with a Master of Urban Planning degree, but I didn't go to school with Mr. Phillips, just for the record. And I have served in many capacities as in-house municipal planner, as consulting professional planner, advising half a dozen northern New Jersey municipalities as their planning consultant, board planner for a number of those communities as well. And now in this stage of my career, pretty much appearing as an expert planning witness before boards such as this. You may recall seeing me not too long ago on several applications here. The board did qualify me at that time, and I've not done anything wrong that would warrant not qualifying me, but I'll leave that up to you. My license remains in good standing as we speak.
Thank you, Michael. If it pleases the board, I'd ask that Mr. Pesolano be accepted and recognized as an expert in the field of professional planning.
Is there my phone?
Can you please use the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do, just two. Mr. Pesolano, who is your client?
My client is a group of neighbors in the surrounding community around the project site.
And who is paying your bills, sir?
Objection. Yeah. You know,
I can't answer that.
you can ask him. But this goes to his qualifications. You can see
Oh,
that across.
Okay, that's fine. I'll save it.
Okay. We'll accept Mr. Pesolano as a expert in professional planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Michael, you've reviewed the subject application from a planning perspective,
I have.
and can you describe the findings in your analysis with respect to the application that's submitted?
Yes, gladly. I was retained to look at the application from a planning perspective, which involves the usual drill for planners to look at the site, which I did do in person. I studied it extensively from remote resources as well, the site and the area. I checked in with the applicable municipal development regulations, master plan materials, discussed the application with my clients, and have formulated my opinions about the main question: does this application meet the criteria for the grant of the relief requested? And so with that, I may, Mr. McBride, I will dive right in. The application was described, I'm not going to do that to everyone. Everyone knows what's before the board tonight, unless you really want me to. It is obviously a novel type of application with multiple single-family dwellings on a single piece of property in the GSOU zone. I'm sorry, the OSGU zone. The application itself struck me as a sharp departure, I'll say, from the intent and purpose of the municipality's view of this zoning district and what its intent and purpose is. And largely the zone is intended to track with its name, to demonstrate through land use a characteristic of openness and open space. Therefore, there are uses that are allowed that would facilitate that type of characterization on an ongoing basis. Today, the site is part of a golf course that has been long-standing on the ground. What is proposed is take a chunk of that golf course and convert it to a new residential neighborhood containing 13 single-family homes. To me, I'll get right to the heart of cut to the chase, as they say. I find that the use is exceptionally hostile and contrary to the township's zone plan and zoning ordinance. I would disagree extensively with Mr. Tobia's assertion that this is not an attempt to zone or rezone. I find just the opposite. We have a large tract of land, irrespective of the size of the OSGU zone in its entirety. This is a large tract of land, almost 5 acres, 4.74, I believe is the number on the engineering drawings. I recognize this as basically an attempt to create a new zone. The idea is new. There's no question about that. The idea originates somewhere with the property owner to seek this project to be approved. But at the end of the day, this board does not have the authority to create a new zone, which I'm sure the board knows. But what is proposed here is just that, a wholesale rewriting of what the zone plan should be for this nearly 5 acre tract of land. Even if the unit count, the number of homes that are proposed, is ultimately reduced, this matter belongs before the governing body for consideration for a zone change, not before this board for a variance. Why do I say that? Well, the OSGU zone is a rare category of land use because the township is considered fully developed and there is a history of very careful planning attention to this particular zone, as exhibited, as I found in reviewing the master plan materials of the township. It's not just vacant surplus land, but rather a key ingredient to the ambiance and character of this particular area. The governing body itself could very well have designated this land for housing, but has not done so. It has full power to do that. The planning board made no such recommendation to do what is proposed here in the master plan reexamination report. Instead, it continues to be included as valuable open space in the township's zone plan and on the ground as well. The township's housing element and fair share plan does not consider this land to be available for housing. I
Could you
believe
repeat that, please?
the township's housing element and fair share plan does not consider this land to be available for housing, this particular 4.74 acre chunk of land. It is now part of the golf course. Why would it consider it as available for land? However, township authorization, in my view, to carve up this golf course for housing could indeed set a disastrous precedent for future rounds of affordable housing, potentially putting other open space, government use open space on the auction block to be replaced with housing. Even Manhattan, with its constant pressures for more housing, has left intact its beloved Central Park. Retaining that open space serves the entire population rather than benefiting a handful of people by converting it to housing. Retaining this open space that we're talking about in this application in Morris Township would serve the same important function. Retaining natural land as open space helps keep natural systems serving their multitude of functions, again, for the benefit of the greater good. From a site planning perspective, I've reviewed hundreds of site plans in my career, and I found quite readily that placing homes so close to an active golf green is foolish and much worse, a safety risk. The realistic potential for serious use conflicts would exist on a daily basis. We almost heard from Mr. Tobia about the stray golf balls how they would be handled. I didn't hear that testimony. I don't believe he actually delivered it. But I believe, from my observation, from work on other golf course applications, that golf balls that stray from the fairway can become dangerous projectiles, posing daily risks for property damage and personal injury. Maintenance of the golf course will bring noisy equipment to the property boundary between residential and golf uses. Residents of the township should not knowingly be subject to these sharp land use conflicts. On a different angle here, I looked at the roadway, the proposed roadway width of 22 feet, and even with the sidewalks on both sides. It's a very unusual arrangement to have perpendicular parking on a residential street as is proposed. And what I foresee being a potential safety factor here is someone on the sidewalk walking along thinking they're safe from being reached by a car backing up when they may not be. There really is no parameter for that backing up vehicle out of that perpendicular, any of those perpendicular spaces, to be on the lookout for a pedestrian or come so close that it may involve contact. From an aesthetic perspective, the open views to largely natural surroundings would be ruined by the placement of a housing development in this location. It would be visible from the clubhouse and from many parts of the golf course, which would constrain the realm of play for users of the golf course, in my opinion. From a community form and density perspective, the subject project seeks to convert building-free open space to something quite the opposite. That is a highly dense, much more intensive utilization than permitted for single-family use in the OSGU zone. The maximum allowed density for residential use here is 0.33, 1/3 of a dwelling unit per acre. And that's based on the RA 130 minimum lot area of 130,680 square feet. The proposed density is 8.3 times greater than that. 8.3 times greater. I said that correctly. At 2.74 dwelling units per acre. The current zoning scheme strongly suggests that the pre-existing density of smaller lots in the RA 15 zone was recognized by the planning board and governing body and deliberately contained by virtue of the current zoning for much larger minimum residential lot sizes in the OSGU zone. This zoning in its current state was derived from a deliberate and ongoing planning and zoning process by the two agencies responsible for the establishment of development patterns throughout the entire community, that being the planning board and the governing body. The current application seeks to completely undermine the township's land use planning achievements on this spot. The zone plan deliberately seeks to minimize utilization throughout the OSGU zoned areas of the township. That's a matter of policy and stated so in the planning background materials I reviewed. The golf course use is permitted and appropriate as it invokes a clear sense of open space mixed with generous vegetation. It contains access by users and service providers to its principal driveway, and it provides for a reliable and stable character-defining asset in the entire area surrounding the course. In sharp contrast to this intentional planning vision, which is a reality on the ground today, the applicant seeks to erode the values thus far achieved by virtue of a permanent removal of the open space values spanning 4.74 acres and a new source of daily vehicular traffic, especially impactful relative to the intersection of Springbrook Road and Mount Campbell Avenue, an intersection characterized by poor sight distance, an angled intersection, and vertical curvature at the point of intersection by my own observation and navigation of that intersection with my car. If the site is to be maintained and managed by, this is another point, if the site is to be maintained and managed by, maintained by a management entity or a homeowners association, that's the mode that's proposed here, both are prone to sudden widespread maintenance failures, in which case a large tract of very visible land could become a source of blight quite quickly and for extended periods. The design of the project as a single lot with multiple single-family homes is an obvious attempt to disguise multiple nonconformities concerning the legislated development pattern for the township's OSGU zone. To me, what I have stated thus far collectively result in a substantial detriment to the public good should this application be approved. To break it down into its subcomponents, let me start with use. The proposed use is multifamily, in my opinion. I understand there was dialogue with Mr. Phillips and the applicant's planner about what the nature of this should be called. But at the end of the day, I find no other way to label it other than multiple units on a single piece of property. When you have 3 or more units on any other piece of property, you have a multifamily use. In this case, there are 13 proposed units on a single piece of property. To me, that's by definition a multifamily use, not single family. Single family is in the mix as a structure type, but the use itself, the nature of the use itself is multifamily. 13 detached single-family units on one lot is not permitted and substantially inconsistent with the surrounding development pattern. The planning testimony outline that I reviewed, submitted by Mr. Tobia, made no mention that a D1 variance for multifamily use is required. And I heard dialogue in this evening's proceedings to validate that belief. However, I maintain that that is not the case, that what is proposed is indeed a multifamily use. The municipal land use law requires a D1 variance for a use or structure not permitted in the zone either. In other words, a use or structure not permitted would trigger a D1 variance. Here we have a use that's not permitted. The use not permitted is multifamily. According to my reading of the zoning ordinance and its structure, the clear intent for accommodating single-family detached dwellings for each such dwelling is for each such dwelling to be placed on its own lot, as required by Section 95-33, which calls for no more than one principal dwelling per lot. And that subjects each lot to the effective density, minimum lot area, minimum lot frontage, and all other OSGU bulk requirements. The D1 use variance is required by the planning testimony of Mr. Tobia. However, it more spoke to the cluster idea. I heard that terminology used to describe this project, even though clusters are not permitted specifically in OSGU. That's how this development was characterized. The applicant's planning rationale, in my perspective, fails to address the myriad implications of such a sharp departure from the zoning plan here, but instead asserts that the outcome is compatible with surrounding development. On its face, if you agree, Board, that this is a multifamily use, there's no way then it can be called compatible with the adjacent and surrounding single-family detached uses. Mr. Tobia went to great lengths to point out just how populated the surrounding area is with almost exclusively single-family detached uses. So to insert a multifamily use on a nearly 5-acre piece of land is a very sharp departure from the zone plan and zoning ordinance for the municipality, the Township of Morris. Now, I mean, no disrespect to the applicant or its team in saying the following. This is just a point. I believe that the applicant has gone to great lengths of subterfuge to obscure the true nature of the project by cloaking it within the rubric of maintenance-free living. The zoning ordinance provides for such housing choice in attached housing developments, but very conspicuously ordains that single-family detached structures shall be set on individual lots with definite boundaries. You need only drive around to observe this countless occurrences of this pattern as prescribed, because you see it everywhere. That's what the single-family zones are built as, detached separate lots. This, to me, this audacious proposed departure from the prescribed manner for creating single-family detached housing, in other words, one lot versus 13 individual lots, appears to be for the purpose of avoiding the many dozens of deficiencies that would apply under the individual lot scenario, as I will detail as I go further in my testimony. I want to address Mr. Tobias' observation that, in his opinion, that the bulk standards of the OSGU zone are subsumed within the D1 variance. I don't dispute that principle. That follows the Palaio case, where you have zoning for the community, and if the community doesn't contemplate a particular use somewhere, of course it's not going to have bulk standards specific to that use. However, that does not make bulk issues non-applicable or minor in their nature. Particularly with single-family detached development, bulk standards are everything. The nature of neighborhoods are established on the basis of lot areas, frontages, lot width, building placement, spatial arrangements between buildings, etc. They're not immaterial in this application either. We have a proposal for 13 single-family detached dwellings in a very compact form, which is, again, a very sharp departure from the intent and purpose of how single-family residential neighborhoods should be created and what they should be. As for density, a density variance pursuant to the statute under section D5 is required for this 4.74 acre site. Again, it's the density of 13 units here is 8.3 times the permitted density. Mr. Tobia opined that, and I concur, that one dwelling unit could be built on this 4.7 acre tract of land under the current OSGU bulk requirements. That the applicant chose to create a 4.74 acre lot is the applicant's choice to create a 4.74 acre lot. If it wanted to accommodate development of a greater nature, it could have acquired more land, but chose not to. For me, it defies logic how this excessive density can mitigate the total loss, and I mean total loss, of open space values from the proposed conversion of natural land to overly dense housing. Density calculations in dwelling units per acre is the standard of measurement of this residential density. If anyone has questions, I can go over the math with you, how I arrived at my numeric conclusions on density. But I will move on. As to the bulk that I touched on a moment ago, dimensional requirements. The RA 130 district is the standard for evaluation of bulk measures, not the RA 15. Mr. Tobia acknowledged that under cross-examination, of course, but I think this is a key point in the evaluation by the board of the right fit of this application in the proposed location. There is a regulation for 300 feet of required frontage for each single-family detached lot per the RA 130 zoning districts. There's 597.23 linear feet of frontage along Springbrook Road, not enough for even 2 conforming lots, should there be that much land area. As to frontage within the interior of the proposed 13-lot development, what is purported is the creation of frontage via a new road, but it fails to assign frontage on it to each detached dwelling. Even if it did, I believe each dwelling would have substantially less frontage than the required minimum of 300 feet. So in essence and in concept, just hear me out on this. I know this is a debatable point. I would add 13 instances of proposed insufficient lot width to the mix the board should be considering here. Moving on to lot area, minimum is 130,680 square feet, or 3 acres. The proposed gross land area per house, again, because they're not individual lots, I couldn't specifically do the math on that, but I took all 13 and compared it to the land area available for it, and that's 0.36 acres per house. Zone plan says 3 acres. This project says 0.36 acres per house. The mismatch is obvious. So 13 area deficiencies are also effectively proposed here. Additional points for your consideration. In the testimony outlined by Mr. Tobia, it acknowledges that cluster development is specifically prohibited, thus requiring a D1 use variance. However, there is another section of the ordinance that speaks to clustering in the OSGU zone. I believe he characterized that as a conflict within the ordinance itself. But even that, if it were to be truly implemented, says that any clustering in the OSGU zone would need to result in a minimum individual lot area 100,000 square feet. So the ordinance itself is not silent on what clustering in the OSGU zone would look like. It very much details a much less dense scenario than what is in this application. As to the front setbacks, there are 2 realms of this. One is facing Springbrook Road, and the other is facing the proposed new Road A within the development that's proposed. The project setback from Springbrook Road is only 1/2 of the required 100 feet of setback for residential uses in the OSGU zone. Where structures in this situation, where the structures are proposed in an ultra-dense arrangement compared to the RA 130 standards, there is a valid basis, perhaps even an implicit mandate, for a front setback at least equal to, and probably should be much greater than 100 feet. In my opinion, there's no valid justification whatsoever for a setback of less than 100 feet from Springbrook Road for the current proposal. Under that finding, I would add 6 front setback deficiencies to the mix. As for the front setback from internal New Road A, the site plan fails to show front setback distances specifically for each individual proposed dwelling. However, where the site plan shows a composite distance of 76 feet between building fronts and a 22-foot paved internal roadway between these building fronts, the math I used creates an average front setback of opposing buildings equating to about 27 feet to New Road A. This substantially fails to meet the zoning ordinance mandate for 100 feet from any road. Not even one proposed home meets the required front setback of 100 feet from New Road A. Add 13 front setback deficiencies here. Significantly, the average setback is only 77% of the minimum 35 feet if the project was located in the RA 15 zone, which it is not. This fact greatly undermines, in my opinion, the already weak planning argument that the project is compatible with RA 15 development standards. As for side and rear setbacks, in this situation, no dimensions are provided from building to building, but scaling, my own scaling indicates no conforming side or rear setbacks. Side-to-side spacing between structures ranges from approximately 22 feet to 42 feet. That's from building to building. These were on their own lots, that you should cut that in half, so the setbacks would range from 11 to 21 feet if there were lot lines between these dwellings. So add 24 bulk variances for individual side yard deficiencies. Add that to the growing heap of departures from the Morris Township zoning ordinance. As with the substantially deficient average front setbacks, the project average side setbacks fail to meet even the minimum setbacks of the RA 15 district, further disproving the claim that the project comports with the surrounding RA 15 development. The minimum rear yard setback in the OSGU zone is 100 feet. There is no proposed home that exhibits an effective rear setback of more than 60 feet by my scaling. Most are much less than 60 feet by my observation. Most are at about 40 feet. So add 13 rear yard deficiencies in essence. So the tally so far, total yard deficiencies, if this were a conventional development with individual lots, there would be 56 individual deviations from the RA 130 zoning district standards. 19 in the front, 24 on the sides, and 13 in the rear. Still more, the building coverage maximum required in the RA 130 zone is 10%. The project proposes 150% of that at 14.9%. As to lot coverage, the maximum allowed is 25%. The project proposes a 31% of lot coverage, 24% more coverage than permitted. So, proposed are 56 yard deviations in effect, plus 13 lot width shortfalls, plus 13 lot area deficiencies, plus 2 coverage deficiencies of a substantial magnitude, plus a substantial density departure, plus 3 if you count my D1 use variance being needed for the multifamily use, total of 3 radical deviations for use, add up to an extremely poor match to the vision for the OSGU district in Morris Township. All with the end result of permanently eliminating 4.74 acres of perfectly good existing open space within the OSGU zone, which is expressly intended by longstanding planning policy and regulation to preserve and protect open space. It is unconscionable to me that this proposal can even approach having sufficient merit to warrant approval. This proposal so completely fails to adhere to the township's carefully considered planning and zoning requirements It effectively seeks to create an entirely new set of development standards, which again is illegal in New Jersey. Only the governing body has the power to zone. The zoning board does not have the authority to set aside, in my opinion, such a vast set of intentions and requirements, in my opinion. So my conclusions for what this project constitutes and why it should be rejected are as follows. The project fails to depict any semblance of consistency with the zone plan or zoning ordinance, as you heard in my remarks. It effectively and substantially undermines the basic planning and zoning principles of the OSGU district that have been carefully considered by the planning board and governing body over many decades and designed for optimal community benefit by the two agencies that have that specific role for producing optimal community benefit. This project purports to effectively create a new zoning district of nearly 5 acres where multiple principal structures could exist on the same lot with extremely deficient setbacks and at a density that is unconscionable at more than 8 times the permitted residential density for the OSGU zone. All of this in the absence of the requisite traditional planning and zoning process involving the public, the planning board, and the governing body. I heard testimony earlier that asserted that the master plan has a mandate to do this. I saw no such conclusion in reviewing the 2017 master plan re-examination report, which is a different document than a master plan. It formulates a snapshot of where the township is, a master plan re-examination report, reports on what the issues are, and makes recommendations for further action by whomever. But usually it goes to the planning board. Planning board typically initiates zoning policy recommendations to the governing body. The governing body turns that into law. So none of that has happened here. Yet what is proposed is something so very, very much a departure from what the vision is and what exists on the ground anywhere else in the OSGU district. The project itself proposes, again, 100% elimination of the open space preservation values the OSGU zone was created and is sustained to protect. I believe that the applicant has failed to satisfy the required Medici criteria for the requested D1 use variances and did not adequately speak to the 97 substantial cited departures in my testimony from the relevant RA 130 regulations. Just said they're subsumed. I hope you heard me when I said the bulk is very material to single-family residential development in suburban communities. The basis of the planning proofs rests on the notion that the sharp deviations from the zone plan and zoning ordinance can be justified because the proposed development is similar in character to surrounding R15 lands. The current zone plan calls for a substantially different development pattern for residential use, right up against the R15 zone land. So to me, compatibility with the R15 standards or what R15 is on the ground is a far less compelling argument than maintenance of the planning status quo here. Put differently, being similar to and compatible with the existing RA15 pattern simply means undermining the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance as it's currently constituted. The project goal is said to be to create an alternative housing option said to be aimed at empty nesters among other potential categories of occupants. We now have the applicant amending the application to tonight to represent that it would be a restricted, age-restricted community, 55-plus community. In any form, This is an improper and insufficient basis for 3D variances that the developer is seeking to meet a need in the community that it perceives there to be. It clearly advances principally, in my opinion, the developer's interests. The governing body, as you know, is fully capable of designing and implementing his own plan modification to expand housing type choices, should it find that such choices are in the best interests of the community. In this application, the developer is seeking to embellish its own welfare, whereas the governing body has the needs of the entire community in its purview in its enactment of land use legislation. That's a big difference. Here, there's a microscopic perspective on the world by the applicant as to what suits the applicant's objectives. The governing body is truly the agency that should be dealing with what do we do with 4.74 acres of surplus land at the golf course, not an individual applicant, in my opinion. Reliance on the R15 development standards for use variance justification, to me, is simply an attempt to disregard the primary intent and purpose of the open space and government use zone, which is to accommodate land use characterized by generous open areas, distinct from a development pattern of small lot development. A new entire neighborhood of 13 buildings with no dedicated open space of any value to the community around it is the exact opposite of such intent. This proposal unequivocally seeks to zone by variance, in my opinion, rather than by legislation. As such, it fails to meet the second prong of the negative criteria for a D1 use variance, which requires substantial proof that the project does not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and development regulations of the township. Good timing. I'm almost done. By virtue of the numerous substantial departures from the OSGU zone regulations, the project is clearly and substantially inconsistent with the master plan upon which the regulatory scheme is specifically based. I respectfully submit that this application should be denied. I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's 10 o'clock, and I know that you did not have a chance to see it, hear this, or see it, or review it prior to tonight. So I'm sure that you want time to review his testimony prior to doing your cross-examination, because we want to be fair to all sides, and that's why we asked for it to be submitted in advance. So I think we should defer, and it's also 10 o'clock, so I think we should defer cross-examination until the next hearing. That would be to both experts. But I want to throw something out because it just came to me. Mr. Tobia made a point of saying that the 13 carriage homes are on a parcel of 206,000 square feet, or an average of 1,584 square feet per home. That would also incorporate all the roadway and sidewalks, which normally in RA 15 is not counted as part of the square footage per lot. So I'd like to know what it would be if that was excluded. And I'm sorry that I didn't bring that up before. I apologize for that. Just so we have an idea of what density we're really talking about when we have numbers. Okay, so now I think we have to decide when we're going to have our next meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to prepare for next meeting, because we do have an objector, so I want to make sure the record is good here. Can I just ask this witness 2 questions about, not cross-examination questions, but about his report?
Sure.
And the preparation of it? And I just would like to know, sir, You received the outline of our expert report 2 weeks ago, is that correct?
Yes, well, roughly, I don't know exactly
Okay.
what date.
And the
Most recent.
report that you just gave, sir, I was watching you, it was all written down, is that correct?
What I said tonight is embraced in written words. yes.
Okay, and that writing, sir, how many pages is that?
8
And when was it finished?
today.
Okay, and did you have a draft that you could have sent us, sir?
I chose not to.
For why?
I don't believe it's the objector's obligation to do that.
Okay.
I've
We
never,
asked for
I've
that.
never.
We asked-
So you thought it was okay to
Admitted,
review our report, but you didn't give us your report, is that correct?
That's the way it typically.
Oh,
works.
great, okay.
Let's get this straight. I instructed counsel 2-3 meetings ago, I can't remember what, that in fairness to all parties, that we would exchange expert reports so that nobody is blindsided by what's coming in, and we could have a full and fair hearing on this. And they provided theirs, and I think it's incumbent upon the objectors to do the same.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, may I respond to the issue as to why I chose not to submit? Anything.
No, I think we've already decided this a while ago, so that's why we're not having cross-examination tonight, because everybody wanted to see these things in advance so they could prepare questions and get a full comprehension of what we're actually doing here, and the facts we have to consider, and those facts challenged by cross-examination.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So that's why we're gonna have to look for a new date right now.
Yes, sir.
So, what we got?
Open meetings right now, I have November 25th. That's the earliest I have.
You want to look for a special meeting?
Yeah, we certainly do. It's not going to be all night. I mean, it's going to be
Right.
2 hours, if that.
Let me see.
We've had babies born and entire life cycles of rodents during these hearings. So we got to finish it up. Got to wrap it up. That's a tough transcript. I can't believe they see it. I would have said
Oh.
so.
I'm out of town.
That was good. You're good.
I apologize for not getting quick. I always do this with Mr.
Sonia comes back. Sonia doesn't. Pardon? No. How's everybody on September 30th?
September 30th, the last Monday.
September.
September 30th.
It's the, it's the,
December,
it's the fifth Monday, so that,
Fifth Monday.
yeah, it's the fifth Monday, right?
I'm probably okay.
You good?
Yeah.
I'll be out of town.
You be out of town. Over?
I don't know. I can give you an answer tomorrow. I can't give you an answer right now.
You good, Mr. Williams?
I'm looking right now. It looks like I'm good for that.
September 30th. Well, we'll have 6 members. Mr. Vistolo, yes.
Frank, if you go to a different night, you can have a full board.
I got you.
Yeah.
No, that's fine, September 30th.
Really?
I gotta, I'm gonna check on the room
We may
tomorrow.
have to carry it for a regular meeting. This was- Because it's, you don't have 6 votes.
And you don't want to go in at 6:30.
Okay, we'll have to check if the room is available tomorrow, and I'll get back to you. But right now, we will have 6 members, and Mr. Williams will get back to me.
Yeah.
And Ms. Simmons, you said you were out.
If I change, I'll see if I can change my plans if I need to.
So we'll pencil it for the 30th.
As the 30th? I'll
It's
say
Monday, right? You said?
It's on a Monday, it's the
Yeah.
5th Monday of September.
Direct TV cut out my ESPN and Channel 7, so I'm free all Monday nights. No football.
So we want to announce, Frank, we want to announce October 30?
September.
September.
I'm sorry, September 30?
September 30th.
And if it doesn't happen,
Then you'd have to renotice.
Okay, so Ms. Santiago, you need to make sure the room's ready.
Tomorrow,
Okay. so
definitely I will know tomorrow.
If it's not ready though, we'll have to renotice.
Right.
When's the next regular meeting?
I guess, I'm going to announce one date. So, and if I announce September 30 and then we don't have it, you're going to have to renotice for the October
or November,
or whatever.
whatever date we can come up with.
Isn't there a room czar we could call right now to see if it's ready? No, right? Should we announce it for the 30th and just take a chance?
I could go to the administration office and get the calendar, if you want to give me a minute.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
Yes?
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago.
Are you going to run? Right.
Bring Sonia stocks of donuts and some flowers. Thank you.
Okay.
Huh? Wow. I'm not saying I was here. What am I?